He kissed me like it meant something, then woke up the next morning and said, let's not make it weird, okay? And like an idiot, I nodded because at that point I had already learned how to translate straight boy contradictions into reasons to stay. My name is Eli. I'm 25. I design interfaces for apps people rarely remember using, freelance mostly, which means I spend a lot of time alone. I like quiet mornings, playlists with sad titles, and the way red wine makes me believe I'm someone people don't forget. I've only told 3 people in my life that I'm gay. None of them were my parents. All of them, at some point, called it just a phase, so I learned to live in lowercase, to be helpful, easygoing, the kind of person who says, don't worry about it, even when I should have worried. When Leo moved in, loud, magnetic, emotionally chaotic Leo, I didn't think he'd notice me. But he did, at night, when it was dark enough not to matter. His name was Leo. We met through a mutual friend when I needed a roommate. He'd just broken up with someone. I just stopped pretending I liked living alone. We were both too broke to afford rent in this city without splitting it, so we signed the lease, bought a shared couch, created a cleaning schedule, started calling the apartment ours. He was charming. The kind that didn't try too hard, which is exactly why it worked. He'd leave half-drunk protein shakes in the fridge and pretend they were for me, borrow my hoodies and never give them back, call me Eli boy when he was too sleepy to remember how old we were. And at night, when we watched TV together and our knees touched on the couch, he never moved away. The first time it happened, it was raining. We had wine, too much. He was sprawled on the couch, head tilted back, shirt half unbuttoned. He looked over at me and smiled, the slow kind. The kind that makes you forget why you built walls in the first place. Then he sat up and he kissed me. No warning, no apology, just a kiss. Soft, open, real. I didn't move, didn't pull away. I kissed him back. 'Cause how could I not? We didn't talk after. He passed out in his room. The next morning he walked into the kitchen and said, last night was wild. I was so out of it. I waited for anything, any sign that he remembered. He looked at me, smiled, poured cereal like nothing had happened. Let's not make it weird, okay? And I said, okay, because I wanted to believe it was just fear, that he needed time, that maybe if I stayed kind, stayed quiet, stayed available, he'd come around, because that's what we're told to do, right? When we love someone who won't say it out loud, we wait and wait and wait. The second time he kissed me, he didn't even warn me with a smile. It was during a movie, a forgettable comedy on a forgettable Thursday. He'd had 2 whiskeys, not enough to forget how to spell his name, but apparently enough to forget the line between bro and don't. He leaned against me, shoulder to shoulder, then slid down slowly until his head rested in my lap. I froze, my hands hovered over his hair for a few seconds, then I let them settle. That's when he looked up, eyes glassy, smile lazy, and said, you always smell like home. And then he kissed me again. It wasn't passionate, wasn't messy. It was honest, or at least that's what I told myself. Because when someone only reaches for you in the dark, you start convincing yourself that maybe they just haven't learned to love in the light yet. That night, he fell asleep on the couch. I covered him with a blanket, brushed his hair back, and stayed up until 3 a.m., replaying every word, every breath, every shift of his body like I was decoding a language only he and I could speak. The next morning, same script. God, I drink too much. Did I say anything weird last night? You're such a good roommate. I'd be lost without you. I smiled, said, you're fine. And he grinned like that settled everything. It became a routine after that. Friday nights meant cheap wine and too many shared glances. Saturdays meant accidental cuddling that lasted just long enough to feel real. Sunday mornings meant breakfast like nothing happened. He'd ruffle my hair, call me kid, ask if I wanted to go grocery shopping together, like we were some domestic fantasy in disguise. And I stopped dating, stopped answering texts from guys who actually wanted to see me in daylight, stopped opening apps, stopped hoping for anything other than 10 p.m. Leo. Because when someone keeps touching you like they mean it, but never says your name like it matters, you learn to make peace with the silence in between. It was his birthday, a house party, packed and loud, the kind where no one remembers who invited who. Leo was glowing. Button-down shirt, sleeves rolled, red Solo cup in hand. He moved through the room like a favorite song. Everyone turned when he passed. I stayed in the corner, told myself I was just being chill, but the truth, I was waiting for the moment he'd glance my way, for the moment I'd matter, even in public. Around midnight, the lights dimmed and someone brought out cake. Leo blew out the candles, then turned, smiling too wide, and kissed me, right there. In front of everyone. It wasn't long, wasn't deep, but it happened, and for one stupid shivering second, I thought this was it. He's ready. He chose me. Then came the laughter, not the sweet kind, the here he goes again kind. A guy across the kitchen snorted and whispered, "Classic Leo move." I looked at him. He looked back, eyebrows raised. "You didn't think you were special, right?" I stood still, frozen, not because of what he said, but because of how easy it came out of his mouth. Like this was known, like I was just late to the memo. After everyone left, Leo passed out in his room. His phone buzzed beside him. I shouldn't have, but I did. Unlocked it, scrolled, looked. And there it was, a hidden album titled Drunk Nights Never Talked About, 27 photos, 4 different guys. Me curled up on the couch with him, me asleep with his hand on my chest, me blurry in the kitchen, him kissing my cheek. But also Marcus, Tomas, a guy I didn't even recognize. All with the same look, half hope, half disbelief. I closed the phone, sat on the floor of the hallway, and laughed, quiet, bitter, fractured laughter, because I wasn't a secret. I was a setting, a scene he liked to repeat, then erase. I didn't pack that night. I just left, grabbed my keys, my wallet, a hoodie that wasn't his, and walked out, stayed at Maya's place. She didn't ask questions. She just opened the door and said, "So, he finally did it, huh?" And I nodded, not because I was okay, but because I was done. Leo called the next morning 6 times. Then texts, "Hey, are you okay? Where are you? Did I say something?" If this is about the kiss, I swear I didn't reply. Day 2, he showed up at Maya's building. Rang the bell. I watched from the window as he stood there, in the same hoodie he once said made me look huggable. He stared up, holding his phone like it could summon me. I didn't move. I didn't come down. Later that night, I opened our old chat, typed exactly 11 words. You don't get to rehearse queerness on people and call it confusion. And I hit send. No follow-up, no read receipts, no goodbye. Because the truth is, you can forgive someone for not loving you, but you don't have to let them practice on you while they figure it out, especially when they do it in the dark and erase it by morning. I didn't cry much, not because I was strong, because when someone's been erasing you in real time for months, there's not much left to grieve. I wasn't angry, not in the way people expect. I was clean, like someone had turned off the background noise I didn't even realize was always playing. At Maya's, I sat on the couch for hours, didn't scroll, didn't post. I just stared at the wall and thought, what do you do with this kind of hurt? The kind that's not loud, but long. The answer came quietly. Almost like a dare, you tell it back, but better. I opened my laptop, created a folder called Rehearsals. Inside, I dropped every screenshot I had ever saved, not just the kisses, not just the chats, the voice notes, the Spotify links, the grocery lists where he added get Eli's favorite cereal like it was no big deal. I remembered every time he said, "You're my soft place. I don't do this with anyone else. You get me." And I remembered the album, Drunk Nights, Never Talked About. He didn't just use me, he collects people like me, then deletes them by daylight. The idea came like a whisper. I didn't want revenge that made him cry. I wanted one that made him think. That made everyone who ever nodded along with him look again. I titled the project Soft Boys Echoes. It would be an anonymous digital zine, an art showcase with curated submissions about romantic ambiguity, queer erasure, and emotional performance. Every page, a collage of moments pulled straight from my life with Leo, but stylized, layered, disguised just enough so that only people who really knew would know. One panel was a screenshot of a blurry couch, overlaid with text. He kissed me like a dare, then said I misread the moment. Another page had a list of Spotify links, each one titled The Time He Messaged Me, Thinking of You. A third page was just a black screen with white text. You were my soft place. Every man who needed cover, never commitment. I worked on it for 2 weeks. Careful. Precise. Like I was building a mirror and daring him to look into it. I added poetry, snippets from real conversations, even handwritten notes he once left me on post-its. I pixelated faces, distorted voices, but the energy, the truth, unmistakable. Then I made flyers, QR codes, minimal text, no context, an anonymous exhibition on intimacy and silence, curated by someone who remembers everything. I printed 300 copies, dropped them off in bookstores, coffee shops, and of course, the University Creative Arts building where Leo used to hang out. It took less than 48 hours. The zine went live on a Sunday. By Tuesday, it had over 12,000 views. The QR code was posted on 3 group chats I used to be in, then made it to the creative writing Discord, then Twitter. Someone tweeted, "This feels too real." Like someone's calling out a very specific type of guy. Another, "If you've ever been someone's midnight secret, read this." And someone else, more direct, "Anyone else feel like this is about Leo?" I didn't reply, didn't like, didn't share. I just watched. A few days later, Maya sent me a voice memo. I ran into Leo. He looked rough, said something about how people are misinterpreting art, then said, "I never named anyone. They're just choosing to assume." She paused, then added, "That's how you know it's hitting." He texted me once, "Did you make that zine?" I didn't respond because he already knew the answer. And because for once, silence wasn't me being afraid. It was me being clear. I printed a physical copy, kept it in my drawer, not to gloat, just to remember. That truth doesn't have to scream. Sometimes it just has to echo in enough people until the right one finally hears it. I didn't celebrate the zine going viral, didn't pour wine, didn't post a "told you so." I just opened the windows, let the breeze move through the room, and I sat, not in grief, not in anger, just in myself. I went back to work, started sketching again, opened my Figma boards and saw designs I hadn't touched in months. They felt like messages from a different version of me, one who thought being wanted meant being chosen. I didn't delete them. I just saved them in a new folder, named it Unhidden. I said yes to a date, a soft-spoken photographer named Milo who didn't flinch when I told him I don't drink anymore. He asked me what I was looking for. I said, peace, and maybe someone who doesn't call me a mistake when the sun comes up. He didn't laugh, didn't joke. He just said, that sounds reasonable. We went for a walk after dinner. No pressure. No hand-holding, no forced charm, just steady steps, one beside the other, like maybe the world didn't end in romantic tragedy. It just kept going. A few weeks later, I got an email from a curator. They'd seen the zine, wanted to feature Soft Boys Echoes in a digital exhibition on queer identity and erased intimacy. They asked if I'd be open to submitting a personal statement, something about the intention behind the work. I hesitated. Then I opened a blank page and wrote, "This wasn't meant to expose, it was meant to illuminate, because some of us learned to exist in whispers, and we deserve to be heard too." They asked if I wanted my name attached. I said yes, not because I needed credit, but because I no longer needed to hide behind lowercase truths. The exhibition opened with over 40 entries. Mine was somewhere in the middle. Visitors left comments. Some wrote about how familiar it felt. Others said it made them cry. But my favorite one just said, "This is the first time I've seen myself without flinching." That night, I walked home alone, but not lonely. I made tea, lit a candle, and sat by the window. No phone, no pings, no shadow waiting at the door, just quiet. And this time, it didn't feel like being forgotten. It felt like freedom. It was a Wednesday. I was at a tiny gallery in East Side, standing in front of a piece I didn't fully understand, abstract lines, pale blues and silvers that reminded me of something soft I couldn't name. And then I heard it. Eli? I turned. Leo, he looked smaller, not thinner, not older, just less like the version of himself that used to fill every room. He took a hesitant step forward, then stopped. "I didn't know you'd be here," he said. I nodded. "It's a public show." He gave a weak smile. "Right." We stood there, both of us facing the painting now. like it might save us from actually looking at each other. He cleared his throat. You're doing well. I am, I said, and I didn't have to lie. He glanced over. I read it, the zine. I didn't respond. He continued, quieter this time. I deserved it. That I didn't argue, because some truths don't need validation. They just need to exist. I didn't know how to handle it, Leo said. His voice was barely above a whisper. I didn't know what I felt. I didn't move. Didn't nod, didn't rescue him from the silence, because for once I wanted him to feel what it's like to be the only one unsure in the room. I was confused, he continued. I thought if I could keep it between us, it wouldn't count, that maybe I could just figure it out without hurting anyone. I let out a breath through my nose. Except you did hurt someone. He flinched, but I didn't raise my voice, didn't turn bitter. I just said it, plain, soft, like I was stating the weather. He looked at me, and for the first time, I think he really saw me. Not as the soft landing, not as the maybe, but as the person who kept standing when he left the room, and who never waited at the door again. He reached into his coat pocket, pulled out a folded piece of paper, shaky handwriting on the front, for Eli. I wrote you something, he said. I don't expect you to read it now. Or ever, but I needed to say it for real. I took it. Not out of hope, not out of softness, just closure. I slipped the letter into my jacket. He watched me like it might fall apart in my hands. I'm glad you're okay, he said softly. I nodded once, then turned toward the next exhibit and walked. No dramatic exit, no final word, just steps. One after the other. Like peace doesn't need to announce itself. It just needs to be chosen. I didn't look back. Not because I didn't care, but because I finally did, for myself. That night, I got home, took off my shoes, lit the same candle I always lit when I needed to remember who I was, and placed the letter, still folded, on the shelf, unopened, because I already knew what it said. And more importantly, I already knew what it wouldn't change. The event was called Speaking in First Person, a community open mic night for queer writers. I almost didn't go, but Milo nudged me, said, you always say stories matter more when they're told out loud. And so I printed mine, single-spaced, 3 pages, no edits. When they called my name, I walked to the front. Not nervous, just quiet, the kind of quiet that doesn't beg to be heard, but knows it will be. I adjusted the mic, held the paper with steady hands, and began. This is a story about hands that never held me in the daylight, but knew exactly where to find me after dark. About someone who called me his comfort zone, but couldn't even call me by my name in front of his friends. The room was still. Not frozen, just listening, like they'd all been waiting for a story that sounded a little too much like their own. I kept going. He kissed me, then forgot, then kissed me again and said I imagined it, but I remembered. I always remember, because when someone only wants you when it's safe for them, you memorize every moment that felt like it was finally safe for you. I finished reading, looked up, and no one moved. No clapping, not yet. Just the kind of stillness that feels like understanding. Then slowly, fingers snapped, a soft sound, then more, and I exhaled. Not relief, but release. I walked off stage. Milo was waiting. He didn't say, I'm proud of you. He didn't need to. He just handed me a cup of tea, chamomile. No words, just warmth. Later that night, I posted the piece online. Not for attention, not for him, for someone who might be where I was, in a living room, sharing a couch, wondering if the 2 a.m. kiss meant anything at all. And in the caption, I wrote, if they only want you when no one's looking, they don't want you. They want permission to not face themselves. If this story found you in the dark and helped you remember that your light is not optional, don't forget to subscribe. Not just for the next story, but because someone else out there is still waiting for 10 p.m. to feel seen. And your presence here might just be their sunrise. You are not the rehearsal. You are the real thing. Never again let anyone call you confusion when you were always clarity.